Well, every movie that you made, it has an interesting cast, or there's just so much behind these movies that you made. They're basically some of the biggest movies coming out of Hollywood during this time frame, and you're with some of the biggest actors or
The biggest
iconic
actors. I
actors.
work with a lot of premium actors.
So
For
it's a huge list, that's for sure. Moving into what a lot of people know you for. And yes, it's great that you were non, but anyone listening that hasn't seen any of these other movies that we were talking about, I hope you'll check Jack out in them because he's just a great screen presence. And of course, that's
My friends,
exhibited none
I'm
better
not given
than, of course,
to wild,
Superman.
unsupported statements. And I tell you that we must evacuate this planet immediately.
Jor-El, there was a civilization.
Tell us about how that came
much like
about.
ours,
March or
but with
Die,
a greater
and they
intelligence
got a hold of Gene and I
and a greater
and flew us up to London to meet Richard Donner. And and they offered me the character Non, and Richard said to me, how do you feel about playing a deaf mute guy? And I said, I embrace that. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, Jackie Gleason was a friend of mine, and he won an Oscar doing Jigo. If I ever got an opportunity to play a character like that, where I had to use facial and body, you know, emotion, I would embrace it. And Nan was a perfect character because you had Zod was a vicious general, Sarah was a man eater, and somebody had to relate to the kids because Superman was a movie for kids, you know. So I
Sure.
said, take this big hulk of a man and play him like a child.
Right. It's
And
almost like almost like how Boris Karloff played Frankenstein in a
yeah,
way.
it actually worked out very well. It actually worked pretty good. I mean, remember the first Comic Con I ever did, and somebody came up to me and they said, "My God, you can actually speak." and I, and they said, "But your character scared the death out of me." But I loved the character so much because children related to Non, and it worked out pretty good.
Well, that's some of your best villains. You care for them. You don't necessarily agree with what they're doing. So when, you see them getting their, just desserts, like say when Non's getting, I remember as a kid being worried about you as Superman's, putting that tower on top of you. And I remember having empathy for your character, being more worried about your character than what Superman was doing. And yes, that of course I was a little kid watching that and totally connected with what you were doing there, and obviously a whole generation of people connected with your character.
Yeah, no, they actually did. You're right.
The whole thing with Richard Donner. Richard Donner seemed like he was just at the peak of his powers during Superman. I know it's unfortunate that the producers kind of.
Let me tell you what they did. The Salkinds were so foolish because Richard would have done 10 Superman. Okay? In fact, that
Right.
was the original thing. They were going to do 10 films. And he lived, eat, and slept it. He and Mankiewicz were so much into those films. And they brought Lester on because they owed him a picture. And they didn't want to pay Donner. The same as how do you cut Marlon Brando out of a movie? They cut Marlon Brando out of Superman 2 because they didn't want to pay him the points.
I mean, and they had already invested so much money into him.
Brando made $4 million to work for 11 days. There was a funny story where they were working about a week or 8 days or something like that. And they were all having dinner. And Marlon made a statement. He said, "Boy, God, guys, we're really working hard here." He said, and tedious. He said, "Maybe we should take a day off." And Donner said, "Well, yeah, and they're kicking Donner under the table because they needed to get Brando on tape to get the money. They needed to complete Brando on tape so they could go to a bank in Italy and get the money to finish the movie. And Brando, so they said, Pierce Spangler said to him, "Oh no, Marlon, it cost far too much money for us to lose a day." And Brando said, how much it cost for a day shooting? And they said, whoa, God, like 375,000. And Brando said, well, let's take a day off, I'll pay.
Wow.
They almost had a heart attack. Oh my God. They had to talk about it, that one for sure. But Marlon Brando was brilliant. He was just an incredible individual. He reminded me of Mitch.
Was he as eccentric as they let on? Was he just toying with people because he was well aware of who he was?
He was so talented. I mean, you're talking about a talented man, okay? He reminded me of Mitchum because when he walked on the set, you could hear a pin drop. And he
Right.
said good morning to everybody and he said good night to everybody. And that's what Mitchum used to do. It was the old pros were great. And Brando was magnetic. And we sat down. I went up to watch him work one day, and he was doing a shot, and he had cue cards everywhere. And I said, man, what's with these cue cards? Because he did that with our scene with him. We had the rings around us and stuff. And he said, no. I said, you that bored with the industry, man? He said, no. He said, Jack, I started that with Mutiny on the Bounty. I just didn't want the camera to make it look like I had studied a script or anything. I wanted to make it look like I was taking the words right out of the air. And I looked at him. I said, man, you are so full of shit. And he turned around and he ripped off, like he was a great Shakespearean actor. And he ripped off several parables of Shakespeare. And he said, that you must know word for word. This stuff, piece of cake. That's just the way he was. I mean, he was eccentric as hell. He lost a lot of weight to do Superman.
Yeah, after making all that money, he put it back on for Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God, he was huge in Apocalypse Now. He was so big they couldn't actually shoot him in certain scenes.
They have him in the dark quite a bit.
Yeah. He was huge.
But
he lived up on Mulholland Drive on like a little inlet. His house was across the street from Nicholson's house. And they did that Western together. Jack was stoned on coke every day, and Brando was not happy about it because he was clean as a whistle. Brando was a pure actor, boy. He was incredible. I really had a lot of time for Marlon. He reminded me of Mitchum. Mitchum said to me, when you go down to the set and tell him I said hello, and he knew my father. Brando knew my father because he's a New York guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He couldn't. When I walked down the set to see him, when he arrived, he broke away from the press guys and ran right over to me. He hugged me and, "How you doing, kid? Bob, I've been dying to meet you." And we became pretty good friends.
From what I've read about your father, and again, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it when we talk about family legacy. But like your father was kind of the forebearer of the Godfather. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when Brando, the line to Brando, when they approached him to do the drug business, and he said, "If we touch it, our children will touch it. It'll be the downfall of the family." My father said that. My father wouldn't go in the drug business, and my father controlled all the docks of America.
Wow.
And he said, "We're not bringing that shit in on my watch. We didn't sign up for that."
I mean, that's a critical point watching The Godfather when he says that line, because that totally, you empathize with the family more and appreciate more, a little bit more, what they're trying to do.
He just was, Albert was totally against it. And that's why they assassinated him. They killed him because he just wouldn't play the game. And the night before he was shot, Carlos Marcellus and Cesar Trafcanti were at the same hotel that he got killed in. They were at a meeting that night in that same hotel at the Park Sheraton, and they begged him, "Albert, it's only business, please." And he said, no, not my kind of business.
Wow. Hooking us back to Superman, and tell me how adorable was Margot Kidder?
Oh, she was a sweetheart. I liked Maggie a lot. She's such a talented woman. She was crazy, but
She seemed like at the peak of her powers then, just a firecracker and just
well,
very
the
charismatic.
grandma loved her. She was a great talent. Margot really had a great talent. She just got messed up in life a little bit, married to some bad people, and she got into drugs, and it was sad. But she cleaned herself up at the end. At the end of her life, she was an advocate for women and an advocate against drugs and the Indians and stuff, and I think that's what killed her. Actually, she was at one of those sit-ins, and they sprayed something on the people to move them, and I think that's what infected her lungs and killed her.
Oh goodness.
Margot was just a neat lady. I liked her quite a bit.
What also made Superman 2 in particular interesting is just the fleshing out of the villains and seeing Superman up against, yourself and Terrence Stamp and Sarah Douglas.
Sarah was brilliant. Sarah, she was young, and it was her first really big film, boy, and you could tell she was going to be a hell of an actress. And she's a dear friend still today. I mean, Sarah and I talk all the time.
She had a striking look to her as well, kind of like a Charlotte Rampling kind of thing going on.
Sarah was absolutely gorgeous.
And what was Terrence Stamp like?
Terrence was one of the biggest actors in England in his life, and his brother was the manager of the Who, the singing group The Who. Terrence got caught up in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and then he went to India, and he got rolfed and spiritual, and he cleaned his whole act up, and they reached out to him to do Superman. So that was the first clean movie that he did, totally clean and stuff like that,
I heard that he he was in character like all the time. Is that true? Or like you guys kind of hung out as a gang almost. Is that true?
Oh, Terrence was a great actor. He could turn it on and off.
Oh, okay. So that's just.
Terrence was a great actor. He was like I said, he was one of the most brilliant actors in the English acting realm. He was younger. What a handsome guy he was, man.
He was totally cool in that role. That's for sure. As Zod, so how memorable. And then are you just bumping into Gene Hackman again, or were you just like, did you guys know when you were doing March or Die that you were going to see each other on Superman?
Oh yeah, we flew up together to talk about the film. Then we went back to finish March or Die. We knew we were going to do Superman.
I think he's a writer now too.
He's a writer. He's retired.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't come out much anymore. I think he lives in New Mexico now.
Yeah, I just love him in like French Connection and so many great movies.
Talented man, just a real talented actor.
He seems like he's no nonsense too.
Well, he was. I mean, I remember we were doing March or Die, and the director wanted him to do. He said, "Listen, don't think I'm coming out here and be like a chess set that you move around. You do your homework, you get things done the way you want us to do it, and I'll walk on a set and do it. And I'll be back in my trailer until you get that sorted out. See you later."
He turned out to be a really good comedic actor too.
Oh, yeah, I mean, him and Ned
you never
Beatty,
would have thought that.
he and Ned Beatty were great together. And Valerie was Perrine.
Is that Perrine? Now she was considered for King Kong.
Yeah, but she was no Jessica Lange. Trust me.
I know. I always thought that was interesting though. So, Christopher Reeve. How's working with Christopher Reeve?
But he was young. It was the first big thing he ever did, and he should have sent thank you cards to Richard Donner every day. Richard Donner got a performance out of that kid that no one else would have gotten. And nobody will ever be another Superman Clark Kent performance like him. He just did Superman and Clark Kent so perfectly. Richard Donner did that.
Well, Richard Donner is certainly, obviously one of the great directors of the past quarter century or so.
The guy was. I mean, they took when he came on the set, Chris. He was 170 pounds soaking wet.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the guy who did Darth Vader, oh God, what was his name?
David Prowse.
David Prowse. David was going to build him up, and I said to David, "You don't want to pump this kid up with a lot of pump muscle. You want to do like they did with Steve Reeves when he was Mr. America. You want to cut him because he's an ego kid. The kid's got a big ego, and he's not going to wear anything underneath that costume. And if you just so they put 20 pounds on him and defined his body.
Yeah.
And it worked terrifically. He looked great, and he played Clark Kent so well in comparison to what he was with Superman. He shifted characters brilliantly, and that's Richard Donner. Richard Donner did that. See Chris in other movies like Somewhere in Time, he's very stiff. You know?
I will say this about Somewhere in Time, just as a musician myself, the score to that movie, John Barry, who did the score to King Kong.
John Barry was a great, you're talking about a great musician.
I can listen to his soundtracks just in the background and not think of the movies.
You're talking about some talented people here, my friend.
As far as Christopher Reeve, any particular was he in character all the time as Superman?
Christopher, like I said, he was young, and it was the first big role we did. You know, and Mark McClure was a nice kid. He was a young kid as well.
Uh-huh.
And playing Jimmy Olsen, and he played the guitar. Mark's a pretty good musician. And just for an instance, you know, Christopher came into his room one day, and Mark said, "Wow, you got to listen to this new tune, man." And he had the audacity to turn around and say, "Don't talk to me unless you're going to talk like Jimmy Olsen." You know, that's unfair. You know what I'm saying? So it fractured the kid a little bit. Slight incident that I had with me. There was a great restaurant in London, the Italian restaurant that is one of the biggest paparazzi restaurants in London today. It was just starting out. It was the first Italian restaurant, the San Lorenzo on Beecham Place.
Uh-huh.
And it was owned by a friend of mine. I knew the people from Italy that owned it. And so I, pumped it up. A lot of the cast and everybody used to go and have dinner in there. And so did a lot of other actors and, musicians and all. Became a very big paparazzi place. And they were all in there having dinner one night. And I used to go in, because I lived down the street at Cadogan Square. So I used to eat my dinner every night there by myself. I just liked being there. And they were all up in there one night, and Christopher's talking about my father in New York and all.
Uh-oh.
And the owner called me on the phone, and he said, "Jack, how well do you know this Christopher Reeve kid?" And I said, I've been working with him. That's all. I don't know him all that great. Well, I was just working with him. He said, "Well, he's in here talking about a lot of things I don't think he should be talking about." And, so the next day, I grabbed him in the morning, and I took him in a room, and I said, "How well do you know me, young man?" He said, "Well, we work together." I said, "Yeah," but I said, "Next time you mention my name, put Mr. in front of it. And if you ever mention my father's name again, you won't be doing any more movies." And he said, so we were okay, boom, boom, boom. As soon as we get out in the hallway where there's a lot of people and everything, all of a sudden he becomes Superman. He said to me,
"Oh no."
He said, "You can't talk to me that way. Who do you think you are?" Blah, 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 blah. Oh my God. I said, "What did you say?" I grabbed him, put him against the wall, and I was just about to smack him. And Richard Donner jumped up in my ear and he said, "Not in the face, Jack, not in the face."
Oh no.
So I dropped him on the floor and I looked at him. I said, "Kid, you just got the greatest pass you ever had in your life." And then it was over. And we became, friends working together. When you work with people for 3 years, you can't help but,
Oh yeah. And everybody's under all sorts of pressure.
Yeah,
And
so
he was just a young.
press made such a big thing about, "Oh my God, Nam was going to kill Superman." Oh Jesus! Come to me, he said, "Well, what about this big argument you had with Christopher Reeve?" It was just it was a misunderstanding that was straightened out, and it was never talked about again.
Maybe there was just the script was just playing out subconsciously a little bit. Uh, but of course, Christopher Reeve is iconic in the role, and you're iconic as one of his adversaries. And you know, when you talk about the other Superman movies after Donner, I don't understand why we can't have Superman these days like
Well,
this.
we're putting together a project now, and we want to bring back Christopher and the three villains in hologram.
Oh wow!
And it's a great storyline. I mean, we're going to, there's another planet on the other side of the galaxy from Krypton. That's a sister planet to Krypton, and the people on it are relatives of Jor-El. And they've watched all this thing happen and all that, but they have greater technology than Krypton did, and they have this great technology that they can move through time instantly, and they have a technology to change people's thinking process. And they come into the prison and they change our villainism into good guys, to where we become cohorts of Superman.
Oh wow!
Helping fight against all these invasions from different planets on Earth. And we go back to the all-American way of not killing, not having superheroes killing everybody like the bad guys, you know.
Right.
And they're going to, and not even have to lock them up, but to change their whole mindset and send them back to their planets with a different thinking mind, you know.
Is that going to be like through DC animated
Well,
studios? Because I
we're
know.
not animated. We're going to do this like a major film, which we're having a bit of a tussle because Warner Brothers has been turned over. Like now it's owned by Discovery.
That's right.
4 different owners in the last couple of years.
And they just put I forget the guy's name in charge. The guy who does the
James Quinn and this other kid.
James Gunn. Yeah.
Yeah. We're reaching out to people to get. We want to get the license. We don't even want their money. We have the money to do it. We just want a license, and we're going to develop. And you put Christopher back on the screen, people will go crazy.
Right. It's got to be the classic Superman. They've had trouble because they don't do the
It's
classic.
getting darker. They've gotten away from the original Superman thing, you know.
Truth, justice, the American way.
Yeah, they gotten away from it.
You got to do that.
They're getting darker. So we want to bring that all back, you know. Bring the three villains and they're gonna have the, you'll love this. They're gonna have the ability to reverse my lobotomy, because Nam was a major scientist before they lobotomized him. If you read the comic books, he was a major scientist, and then they lobotomized him because he was involved with Zod. And the first words I ever say are going to be, Zod, kneel before Nam.
That would be great. That would be classic right there. Just making these movies. Do you have any memories of making those great fight scenes?
It was brilliant. I mean, we had so much fun, and what people don't understand is that there's no wires. We were in body molds, and they shot us VistaVision on VistaVision. They shot us into the film. We had it was a big 70-foot screen with these pole arms that come out with body molds on the end of them, and we had movements where we could move like we were flying here, flying around buildings, under bridges, and the fight scenes were brilliant. I mean,
did you find that the effects had evolved greatly from when you made King Kong to Superman?
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Salkinds actually bankrupt these poor guys. They had the original LED theory. They were shooting VistaVision on VistaVision. And it meant, like, we did the fight scenes and all with no wire. We were flying around buildings, underneath the bridges.
I love the effects back then, both with Kong and with Superman, just because I guess they refer to them as practical effects, obviously, but it's fun to watch them and try to figure out the ingenuity behind the effect. versus now where everything's just kind of done the same way with the computers and CGI.
See, we didn't use CGI in Superman. It was VistaVision on VistaVision. And that's what led into LED on LED. So we could come back in hologram and shoot this with LED, and you'd swear we were there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I just don't think they don't make them like they used to. I'll just say that.
Well, it's coming around. The LED on LED is going to revolutionize a lot of it.
But of course, any final thoughts about Superman? Anything?
It was a great cast. We had a great time doing it. Richard Donner he was so brilliant to work with. It was incredible.
What was it like when Richard Lester came in? Was that kind of grating on the cast and crew?
It was like it's like going from a college professor to a kindergarten teacher. See, we had already shot 80-some% of the film. That's why the Donner cut came out. And Donner cut. Have you ever seen the Donner cut?
Oh yeah, I've got
Donner
that.
cut is much better than I think it is anyway. But the Lester cut, in order for Lester to put his name up as a director, he had to shoot at least 50% of the picture. So they went back and reshot stuff. That's the Eiffel Tower. It was raining so hard that day that if you really looked at those scenes with the Eiffel Tower, you'd see the policeman who was stopping Margot, spots of water going on his shirt. They must have changed his shirt 6 times. Lester wouldn't stay there 2 extra days to get the shot properly. He just went ahead and shot it anyway, because what he did was he shot it with an open lens so he could go back in the laboratory and make it look like it was sunshine that day.
Oh, okay.
If you look at the cop car behind the policeman that's talking to Margot, the windshield wipers are going like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I think I remember what you're talking about there. But like it would have been nice to see the Donner fully realized version.
I mean, we did scenes where we didn't die at the end. We were carted off into police cars, taken off to prison. Because when we went in that box, our powers got reversed. And they take us out of the abyss and put us into police cars and take us away.
So you all didn't originally fall into that foggy...
We fell into a foggy thing, but they took us out of there and put us in the police vehicles. And
okay.
They shot those scenes.
Oh, that'd be interesting to see. Yeah, it's just very odd that, because the first Superman worked so well. It seemed like it was making tons of money. Why would you stop working with a director that's doing such a good job?
There you go. They were very greedy people.
Wow.
And they took the money. They just Alexander lived on an island off of France. He wasn't even allowed in the country. They were being chased by tax people all over the place.
Goodness.